They took the farmers first. Those who knew the land, the earth, the ingredients of the soil. Those who heard its rumble, felt its movement, understood its seasons. Those who knew seeds and germination, plant spacing and harvest. Those who walked barefoot upon the soil in homage to its life-sustaining power. They took them first. It was no accident. They would farm again in a new world, feeding a nation committed to their very destruction. And after the farmers, they took the healers. And after the healers, the Jali. And after the Jali, they took the storytellers. And then they took the warriors, that our collective strength might be divided. And then they took the artists who told us that we were beautiful. They chained and muted orators and teachers to stop the flow of inspiration and to abort the belief that we too looked like God. In the end, they took everything and everyone that made us wonderful. But it was all because when we beat the drums of warning, most of us were not listening. So we marched quickly. We marched through forests. We marched over hills and valleys. We marched through hot desert land. We marched alongside waterfalls and brooks. We marched through high grass. We marched past monkeys. We marched past giraffes. We marched past lions roaring in the distance. We marched past anthills wherein frightened ants scrambled hysterically. We marched past gardens sprouted but not tilled. We marched past neighboring villages we thought we despised. We marched past sites of ritual where we'd known spirit possession and healing. We marched past huts where government officials once meant to solve collective dilemmas. We marched past people we didn't know. We marched through regions we had never seen. We marched until some of us died. They were unchained and tossed aside. There are no markers to commemorate those lives. Of this we are sure. We marched and 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 we marched some more. The second day on that ship, our humming began at a cool, even pace when beats were slow and lulling. A man purred a dark melody. And then looked around at us. And then he repeated it. It wasn't a groan from pain and desolation, but deliberate lines of constructed meter and time that jarred our spirits and invited our participation. And so one by one, we joined in, some in upper registers, some in the depths of the voice, having found a language that needed no words. We hummed until we believed we'd survive. We hummed until we released mothers and fathers whom we never see again. We hummed until our love for and gratitude to each other was clear. We hummed a celebration for living, for fighting, for refusing to die, for enduring when giving up would have been so much easier, for still believing against all odds that one day, just one day, we would get home. We hummed our commitment to raise children wherever we went in the way of our people. We hummed that our women slightly above us might know we had not forgotten them. We hummed for the dead lying next to us. We hummed for children not yet born. We hummed for children born but left behind. We hummed for kinsmen, yesterday's enemies, who were now precious, coveted friends. And we hummed mostly, y'all. We hummed, and we hummed really, probably we hummed most often because someone beat the drums to warn us, but most of us were not listening. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you for reading that. I feel like as I read your writing and as I'm hearing you speak these words, it's very clear to me that your writing is of ancestral perseverance, ancestral preservation, and especially even how Isaac's song ends, but also what you just read from. And so my question is, how do you balance the responsibility of telling the fullness of our ancestors' stories, the pain, the joy, the shame, all of it?
Yes. I don't think I even need this. Okay, yes, I would answer it this way. I think probably 75% of our ancestors' story, 75% of our story, 75% of the magic and the genius of black people has never been told. Right? And I'm gonna tell you why I believe that. Because when you look at slave narratives, the narratives written by our enslaved ancestors, those are the stories white people could tolerate. Because remember, all of those are published by white people. In fact, most of the narratives are actually told to a white writer who actually writes it on the paper. So in my head, knowing these people as we do, they didn't write exactly what my ancestors said, right? And they left out some things because it would have indicted them entirely too severely. So I'm looking for the part that grandma couldn't say to them. I'm looking for what happened to granddaddy that they never reported, right? And what messes us up, I think, is the stories they do tell are already so horrific. It's like, my God. But the truth of the matter is we endure 10 times more. And what that really then means is that we are 10 times more magical. Right? So it's really the magic of black people I'm searching for. Right? And I'm praying I find it. I'm finding it.
So what is the consequence of that, right? What is the consequence of our ancestors' stories going untold? Consequence to a people and consequence to the world.
I think the consequence, I'm gonna start with me. I think the consequence for me writing it is that you don't get as famous as many other writers, right? But the truth of the matter is it still is critical that I do it because I'm not sure how much they paid Harriet for running, right? And because of that, then I owe a book. You know what I mean? I'm not sure what they paid our grandmothers for scrubbing floors for 45 years, right? But because of that, I owe a book. I'm not sure what they paid black men working on a railroad, all their lives, sending money back home, but really missing the rearing of their children because they were away working. But I think because they did that, I owe it to tell that story so that we don't miss the genius of these people. Now, the cost to our people, I think I'm clearer about. Because what's the cost to a people who don't really understand these stories? What's the cost to black children who don't understand this story? And that is, they think of themselves cheaply, right? Because the level of this expense, without them knowing it, they'll think their lives came very easily, right? And they'll think they came too easy, and they'll take themselves too lightly, and they take their blood too consequentially, right? Instead of understanding that if black blood flows in your veins, you are walking divinity, right? But you can't know that, right? You can't know that if we niggas. You see, that's and what I'm really trying to do is trying to offer to a generation the clarity of our holiness, the clarity of our divinity, the clarity that to be black in America, right, is really to have already won. If you're here, you won. Yes. Right. If you're alive, you won. We won. With all the ancestors who they threw into the Atlantic Ocean, right? We win. But the reason we win, because even those they threw into the ocean, those ancestors fight for us, right? And so I can't think of anything that could devastate me after my ancestors paid that kind of price.
I do believe, though, that it is a burden on a black creative right now, right? You have AI cheapening our art.
Sure.
You have book bans. Several of the authors in this space, including you, are on book ban lists. And
am I on the list? Girl, I'm on the list.
I mean, don't cry for me. You might be on the list.
No, I've already heard this. I'm just
saying. And so, one, how do you maintain these? What rituals and practices do you have in place to maintain that hope and creativity and divinity that you're talking about?
Again, I always put myself in the context of my people. Because Frederick Douglass was on the list, Marcus Garvey was on the list, Zora Neale Hurston was on the list, James Baldwin was on the list. Byron Rustin was on the list. Nina Simone was on the list. You know, I'm just going to go on and on and on and on. So for me to be on the list is really the nod that then I'm doing something marvelous. In fact, if somebody's not on the list, you ain't doing much of nothing. So in terms of ritual, I go to church every Sunday, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, but I don't go to church for theology. I go to church for the ritual of the music, because the music does something that the theology won't do. Black church music does something that the pulpit will not do. And there's a message in the song that does not get repeated in the pulpit. And that's because black people own the music. The theology was given to us, right? We came with the music. We came with the cadence. We came with the rhythm. We came with the syncopation, right? We came with that. We wrote the spirituals. We wrote the gospel, right? We wrote gospel music. Gospel music belongs to black people. But we did not write the theology that's telling us about God, right? For example, you know, most churches preach that there's only one way to get to heaven. You got to go through Jesus to get to heaven, right? And but one way to the Father, but through the Son, right? But then the black church, the black choir will get up and sing 12 gates to the city, right? And we say 3 gates in the east, 3 in the west, 3. In other words, the choir is really contradicting the pulpit. But it would make sense. It would make sense. Because if the same person who held you enslaved tells you how to get to heaven, you might not want to believe him.
I hope y'all not missing this. I hope y'all not missing this.
I mean, how loud, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So this is on my list of questions, because I'm just now realizing that you're creating the good book. And is this like a part of this conversation that we're talking about?
Not so much. You know, a couple of years ago, I was praying, and it came to me that the only reason we keep reading the same book about God is because most of us do not believe we have the authority to speak for God. But somebody did. And what was magical about those folks? Because we know God didn't write the book, you know, we got that, right? So what was magical about the people? What was magical about folks who wrote the Bible? Folks said they were inspired by God. I'm inspired by God every day, right? So I said, God, should I write another text? And I heard God say, I've been waiting on you, right? So I'm probably 90% finished with it. I started this many years ago. It's the book of Tyrone. It's the book of Shaniqua. It's the book of Black love. It's the book of Black prophets. It's that kind of thing.
Well, I'm definitely excited to read it. Now, I like that you brought up how God is speaking to you, because I've heard you talk about ancestry speaking to you as you write. Can you talk about that in your writing process?
My process is that when the ancestors come, I write. You know, when the characters come, I write. I don't ever get to create a story. I don't ever get to make up a story. I kind of wish I did, because I feel like I have some pretty good ones in my head. But it's always characters who interrupt my thoughts, who interrupt my sleep, and they start telling me about their outlandish lives or what they've done or who they are. Once I start hearing them, I go to my computer and I open it up, right? Most memorable was kind of the way I wrote Perfect Peace. I was at a mall and I saw a kid and I couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl. You know, you have that experience and you just kind of stare. You're like, is that a boy? And what I realized is that the bondage, though, was on me, not them. Because I knew it was a human being, right? But I didn't have ways to love human beings outside of categories, right? And I realized, I said, oh my God, I'm the problem, right? And instantly I heard Imogene say, right, I'm pregnant with my 7th child. And I was like, who is this woman talking to me? Right. So I went home and I opened my laptop, and Perfect Peace came straight from my head into the laptop, the way you have it. Yeah. And every day, Imogene would tell me what happened, and then their sons and the brothers would all tell me, et cetera. And then Sugar Baby gets in there, and then, you know. And by the time I got to the end of that book, I was so exhausted, it was like unreal. It was totally unreal. It took me several years to write that book.
It's very heavy and very beautiful and very
Thank you.
important
Thank
to
you.
our past, our present, and our future. So I appreciate you writing that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. So there is an African proverb that says, when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground.
Sure.
You gesture toward this through a lot of your books, but not just spiritually, but also materially, the
Right.
land, the inheritance, the
Sure.
passing on of history.
Sure.
You write in Isaac's song, the only real legacy a father leaves his son is a connection to his past.
Yes.
How do you see the relationship between memory, story, and land in your work?
I think land, especially in the South here in the United States, I think land itself has memory. I think we've missed a lot of the places where our ancestors' memories reside, right? It's like, back in the day, an old man or old woman might actually sit under a tree, right, all day long. Have y'all seen those places where, men would gather under a tree, right, especially summer day or whatever? And the part we miss, and I did too until I studied this, when those men die, right, and in our imagination go to heaven, when the tree dies, the tree's got to go too. Because see, the tree was part of that communal moment. The tree was part of that sharing. It's the life force of the tree that the men were seeking, that the women were seeking when they would go and sit under it. That shade made that sharing possible. So you see, one of the things that we traded when we came here as African people and picked up other people's belief system, other people's religions, etc., we really traded our worldview. Meaning, our worldview as Africans understood that everything living is a part of God. Everything. The trees, the squirrels, water, which is why black folks were singing about water for the first 50 years when we first arrived. Right? God's going to trouble the water. Didn't it rain? Old ship of Zion. All the original spirituals, the main theme is water. But it's because we just got off the water, called the Middle Passage. In other words, our ancestors were telling us the story of the Middle Passage in the song. Right? But if we're not careful, we've missed it. Because there are all kinds of ways in which they were doing this in very, very subversive ways. Because they believed that their own children would get the clues, would get the secrets, because surely we would share the same worldview that they always had. The problem is when we've been educated in the West, we've been educated in school systems that despised us. Being educated in those school systems made us come out of school loving somebody else more than we loved ourselves, and knowing other people more than we love ourselves. The average 16-year-old kid has certainly heard of George Washington, but maybe not James Baldwin. Right. And so this is really devastating, right? It's really, really, really devastating, because what I'm hoping to get us to as a people is to a place of common communal knowledge. What is it that all black people know? What is it that we all share, so that we can make some assumptions in terms of how we honor one another, how we walk with one another, how we treat each other, right? I think it's extremely important that we do that, and I'm fighting hard, trying.
And what about memory, as we talk about that?
Again, memory really is the ability to access whatever happened, not only to you, but to your blood, right? That's really memory. In other words, when we connect to African memory, right? Again, when we go back to the tree, when we go back to the land, really, part of the memory is in the land itself. So really, when you take kids south, you should tell them, take your shoes off. Walk upon this land, because this land knows you. This land knew your grandmother. This is the same place where your grandfather trod. Feel the energy of the earth, because there's memory in that energy, right? This is why back in the day, not so much now, most family reunions, you go back to the family place, because there was memory in the actual physical context of the place itself, right? And memory is critical, because without memory, a person will believe that they are the beginning and the end of themselves. Which means however wonderful or however troublesome a person understands oneself to be, right? They won't really understand that you're connected to a long tradition, right? Of something marvelous and something amazing and something wonderful. It's like, one of the things that certain people do well is children get inheritances and get estates. A lot of people are rich not because of anything they did, but because it was handed to them, right? And I'm not mad at that. What I'm a little frustrated about with black folks, I want us to do better, and not even money. I want us to hand children self-worth, right? I want us to hand children self-esteem, right? So that I don't care what people say about you. I don't care what the school system says about you. I don't care what teachers say about you. They cannot destroy or they cannot diminish your self-worth. But our self-worth is so fragile, right, as a people, men and women. It's so fragile that we are broken very, very easily. And I want to strengthen that so that people can push me over. But really all you're doing is giving me the opportunity to rise again. Right? But a person has to really have a self-esteem so that you don't get obsessed with who did it. It reminds me of that scripture in the Bible that says, consider the ants. Because the thing that's marvelous about ants is you can disturb an anthill and immediately they start rebuilding. You can disturb it again, and immediately they start rebuilding it again. If you come back 10 minutes later, it's rebuilt. In fact, you can't disturb it more than they can rebuild it. And they never look up to see who disturbed it. But why? Because building it is in them. It's what they do. And so instead of fearing, we can't build another Black Wall Street because white folks gonna tear it down. Listen, they can't tear it down more than we can build it if we understand that we were sent as the builder.
What is the blueprint for that, though? How do we move according to that logic and philosophy?
I think we have to change our language dealing with each other. I think we have to speak life into each other, right? And do it in very awkward ways. And I'm saying awkward because it's going to be strange because it's not the way we've done it up to this point, right? We literally have to speak to each other and even physically touch each other, right? The ability to say, good afternoon, sister. When I look in your eyes, I see God. How are you? People be like, man, that's crazy. It's going to be crazy because you're so far from believing you're divine. But it's the same way we talk when we talk to God. When we go to God, we bow, we close our eyes, we genuflect, right? Great God above, the creator of all things. We give God all this obeisance, and I'm not mad at that. The problem is that we don't give it to each other, right? So that if you're my friend, whether you're girlfriend or not, I want to treat you the same way I treat God. I want to wake up in the morning and say to you, my sister, your name is above every other name. I glorify you. I magnify you. I worship you.
I need to write this down. Can you write me some affirmations, please?
Yeah, but I'm being very serious. I'm being very serious. And what's really deep is you need it more than God. God doesn't need to be reminded that God is glorious. God's memory is excellent. We're the ones who forget. You know what I mean? And it would be really hard for our relationship to fall apart if we talk like that. That would be tough to do. Black boys, it would be hard for a black boy to go to jail if I touched him every day and told him there's nothing on this planet that gives me more joy, right, than watching you succeed. You know what he'd want to do? He'd want to succeed all day and night. Because the affirmation of a father who adores you, you can never get enough. Never.
This conversation is really reminding me of Don't Cry For Me, so I want to switch to that.
Okay.
Okay, so your recent release, Isaac's Song, is a follow-up to that, right?
Yes.
And in Don't Cry For Me, we have this deeply regretful father who's writing to his gay son.
Yes.
And first of all, I want to start this. The first line of this book, for a life like mine, there is no redemption. Can you please talk about that first, and then the healing?
You'll laugh at this. I wrote that line and started crying. That's it, don't cry for me. What irony, right? My God. And I wrote this book because I think there are a lot of fathers who missed incredible, incredible children because they didn't come the way they preferred. And I wondered, like, could a parent could you miss God because he just don't look like you? You know, and you know, hypermasculinity, etc., has done such deleterious work in our community, and so much of black manhood has really been wrapped up in questions of performance, right? A lot of brawn, a lot of physicality, right? A lot of chasing skirts, all of these things, right? And part of the problem is we keep getting boys who are not like daddy. But see, it's really narcissistic and it's really arrogant for fathers to keep hoping for mirror images of themselves, right? That's why we call so-and-so Jr., Carl Jr., Carl the Third, Carl the Fourth. You know, we're really just trying to remake ourselves, right? And I really think that if we can get to the place where people begin to understand that you do not conceive children, you simply open the way for them to come. God conceives children. And here's how you know. You don't know if they're going to be tall, short, thick, thin, hair color. You know nothing about this fetus whatsoever. That's how you know you didn't conceive it. You know literally nothing. You don't know if they have 10 toes, 9. You don't know anything. Because God is actually sending a gift to a people when a child comes. So what people got to really ask is, what gift did I need? And that's the child that's bringing it, right? And that's really why I wrote Don't Cry For Me. Because I'm praying I can get parents to pause a minute and to reconsider the possibility that that weird, that strange child, that child that wasn't quite what you dreamed, maybe your dream was the problem.
So you bring up black masculinity, and I want to open up that a little bit, if you don't mind. So in your work, both as a historian and a writer,
yes,
what aspects of black masculinity are misunderstood?
First of all, I think that many more black fathers are extraordinary than people think. We have some really great black daddies, young and seasoned. Right, I want to start there. The second thing is, what most people don't realize too is many black fathers are trying to be good based upon what they imagined, not what they had, right? So the most fragile thing I think we're in the middle of is most black fathers need daddies, right? Meaning, you know, I was telling my son the other day that I would be willing to bet that probably 75 or 80% of black boys have never seen their fathers be sons. I mean, never saw a man adore their daddy or their grandfather. Touch your daddy's head, kiss your daddy, not you, the daddy, right? Because we keep trying to get 18 where you grown now, so it doesn't matter. It's not true.